Hello again and welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, and serving entrepreneurs throughout the US and around the world. Welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited to bring you another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. Today featuring Murray Hidary. Murray, welcome. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, Heather. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. For folks that don't know Murray, this is going to be unlike any conversation you have heard on the podcast so far. I'll start by saying that. It'll be a lot of fun and really I'm just excited. I won't say anything else, but hang on because I think we're going to have a lot of fun today, and it's going to be a topic that you'll find very interesting. And for me, I'm so curious. I just feel like, we could probably spend hours together. But for those of you that don't yet know Murray, Murray is a multidisciplinary artist and tech pioneer. His purpose-driven approach is at the heart of his business success, acclaim as a visual artist, and global recognition as a musician. Ever pushing boundaries and guided by a strong desire to help people find their purpose, Murray is now focused on touring his immersive musical experience, Mind Travel, across the globe. Over the past 5 years, Murray has created over 500 mind travel experiences for over 100,000 people in cities from Los Angeles to London, Paris to Pittsburgh, Berlin to Boulder, in venues such as Lincoln Center, the theater at the Ace Hotel, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Grace Cathedral, and the National Arts Club. Murray created the first mind travel experience in 2013. He invited a group to his living room for a live performance of his provocative, improvisational, real-time compositions at the piano, and then asked them what they thought of the experience. Moved by their emotional response and the power of music to take the group on a deep inner journey, he moved forward to bring it to the world. Mind Travel brings together Murray's passions for contemporary classical music, visual art, theoretical physics, and wisdom traditions. They are the four pillars of an integrated experience that seeks to explore an understanding of the universe at both the visible and hidden levels. In addition to the above, Murray is a certified meditation teacher through the Vedic Center and a certified grief counselor through Our House Grief Support Center. So Murray is down in LA. We were just having a chat about being on the same coast. Murray, it's so great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I just feel like there's so much that I could ask you about. So I hope we can, cover quite a bit of it, but I don't know. I feel like there could be a round two. This is, you are an unusual person, and I'm really excited about all of your experience and the things that you're going to bring to this conversation. So I know when we were chatting before I went live, you said your background is in tech.
Mm.
I'm curious, talk to us a little bit about where you started. Obviously, you've got some interesting things in your past. Talk to us about your path into tech.
So I grew up with music. My first instrument was put in my hands when I was 5 years old. Played the piano since I was 6 years old. And music was really my companion throughout my whole childhood. By the time I got to high school, I knew I wanted to be a composer. I felt like I had my own thing to say with music versus just playing the music of other people. And when I did attend university in New York, I formally studied to be a classical composer. Now, when you graduate with a degree in classical composition, your pathway to a good living is a bit uncertain. And so I'll leave it at that. And so it was really kind of a choice of, do I go into writing like jingles for commercials or TV music, or, that's kind of where the money was in the time when I graduated. And so I would talk to other composers that went that route. And while they said, it's a good living, it's exciting, and you're working with, cool people and, intense deadlines, but the money's good and, you can make a real living. But then I asked him this one question, and I said, when did you write your first symphony? You're the music you wanted to write, not just the music for commercial projects. And they looked at me like I had, 12 heads, and they were like, there's no time for that. Like it's, really tough to make the time for that. So I kind of got that message early on, and I said, well, what else can I do to earn the kind of living I wanted to, still feel creative, still feel like excited at work every day, and then do my music, write the music I wanted to write. And at that time, this little thing called the internet was just starting to bubble up, and you may have heard of it. And my older brother and I, he was more into computers than I was. Growing up, I barely knew how to turn on a computer, but he always was getting the latest computer when we were kids. And so he and I chatted, and we just saw such possibility in it, which all new technologies provide, right? I mean, today, kind of analogous technology would be looking at, say, blockchain, right, and cryptocurrency as an example. And certainly it's very confusing, but so was the internet back, 25 years ago, right? And it, it completely, changed and transformed the world in the same way that potentially blockchain could and most likely will, right? So it was kind of a similar parallel time. And we didn't know if there was money to be made or not, but it was just so cool. And we were like, we just wanted to jump into it. And so we did. And we started our company. We came from a family of entrepreneurs. My mom's an entrepreneur, has her own business. My dad works in a family business that my grandfather started, who came here to Ellis Island, at 15 years old, with nothing in his pocket, and built a business. So we come from that background, and so starting our own business was kind of natural for us. And we had no idea what we were doing, but we just figured it out as we went. And in a way, nobody back then really knew what they were doing. Truly, right? So we were figuring it out, and whatever we figured out, even if it was 10 minutes ago, we were now the experts in that. And so because nobody else knew what was going on, so we really improvised, to take a musical term of mine. we improvised our way through, and eventually built a very solid company, which we incredibly took public only 4 or 5 years after we started it. So it was this incredible journey in my 20s of pursuing not my original passion, right, which was music. The companies had nothing to do with music. But here's the thing that I learned, which was there may be times in our lives where pursuing the obvious passion of our desires and our dreams, it just may not click. It just may not work in terms of generating the kind of income or financial stability from that pursuit that we might want. Now we can still do it, right? Maybe you want to be a novelist or, a great poet, or, so you would still write all the time, but maybe the time hasn't hit yet to really monetize that art and that craft. But here's the thing, there's other things we can do with our time that also resonate with the core values that we have, right? So for instance, for me, one of the core values that drives me to create music is not just creativity, but connection, right? I actually feel a deep and powerful and profound connection through music to myself and to others. And the internet, as different as it is, it couldn't be more different than music, but it actually tapped in to that same similar value set that I had, which was creativity, curiosity, connection, right? And so I was able to satisfy those values, even though I was doing something very, very different. So I would wake up every day and actually be quite excited, even though I wasn't going to play the piano or write music or anything like that at the time, but it still was so thrilling because it was so fresh and exciting. And here's the thing, I kept a piano, Heather, in my office for all those years building those tech companies. And at the end of all those days, those stressful startup days, which I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to, all the fires we have to put out as entrepreneurs, the uncertainties, the things that pop up that you're like, oh, okay, I got to deal with this now. They cause stress. And I would sit at the piano in my office. My staff, my team would be like, where's Murray? Oh, he's playing the piano in his office. And it just allowed me to reset at the end of every day. So I was fresh and focused the coming day.
I love a couple of things about what you said. One, the ritual and how you kept music and piano incorporated in your life. We can come back to that because I have some other questions and thoughts. But the other part, which is really, really important, you talk about there's not always an obvious path to do the thing that we're most passionate about, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is really important for people to understand in their own way and on their own path, because I think so often, you can be in this hard place of like, do I take a job? Do I do this other thing? People may know what they want to do in their heart, but there can be a way of building a bridge to get there, right? And what you're talking about, I think, is one of these ways, is like finding something that you can do right now that calls on the same values that you hold, or some of your greatest skill sets that can still be applied, and maybe you can find meaning or create meaning in this other type of work. That can be really important to eventually get to where you're going.
That's absolutely the case, and I very much believe that. I've lived that. I think there's many things we can do in human expression, right? As human doings, right? That we can express ourselves in, that can be very rewarding, very satisfying, and very fulfilling. And it may not be the obvious one. It may be something that we discover by trying something new, which is why I always advocate, right, especially for folks that are looking to figure out even what their purpose might be, what their passions might be. I actually recommend, how much time are you spending trying something new? Now, that doesn't mean a vocation necessarily. It means watching a documentary you may not ordinarily watch. It means reading a book that is not on your typical, nightstand, right? Yes. A book on your nightstand that might not be there. And so it's conversations, programs we watch. I mean, just exposing ourselves to just something that is out of the ordinary for us. And what happens then is the brain starts to connect dots. Between disparate disciplines, between different genres, different ideas. I mean, for instance, look at mind travel, which is my current expression in the world. It is a confluence, it's a fusion, Heather, between music, of course, in particular Western music, modern, contemporary classical music, minimalism, to be even more specific, with the sensibilities of mindfulness, of Eastern philosophy, of meditation, both the philosophy and the music from those countries and cultures, and which I deeply studied. And those two worlds come together. Now, typically, somebody who goes to conservatory and studies, Western classical music will probably, never be exposed to some of that stuff, and vice versa, right? Somebody who, lives in a monastery and studies mindfulness and meditation will, may not study an instrument to a professional level. Yet, because I uniquely had one foot in both of those worlds, I brought them together, and that really created what I think I would say is my unique voice in the realm of music and in the realm of mindfulness. And probably also, Heather, what is the reason why doing that at I was 22 when I started my first tech company. So what was my I was beginning I was meditating at the time, but I didn't have certainly the experience with mindfulness and meditation that I do now, right, in terms of what really was available. And the same with music and my explorations, right? Music being the language of emotion. How much had I experienced at that point at 22 that would really fill my music with the kind of emotion that would resonate with other people, right? It took many years later to gain the experience of life, the experience of loss, to be able to fill the music with the kind of emotion that would translate to the experience of other people. And that's why, I shifted later in life to a completely different career from tech to music. But it felt very natural because it was like, oh yeah, now I'm ready to naturally do this because I've got all this new experience, right, of life and business and mindfulness and all coming together to form this new expression.
Right. Well, and clearly, for anybody who has visited your site, seen your work, You are an artist. I mean, you're very clearly an artist. And I think the thing that's so powerful about what you do is you are able to bring, at least in my perspective, your whole self to your work. And you're able to like combine all these areas that you talked about just now and have this really unique expression through music and making it much more experiential. How did you get the idea for what you're doing now? Like, describe it to somebody who maybe hasn't been to your website, right?
Right. So, for me, when I put out there publicly for others to share in, for others to experience, is giving people a glimpse behind the curtain of what I would do on my own, in my own home, without anybody there. And now I'm kind of secretly inviting you in to this world I would create. This very much an inner world I would create, but now we're kind of creating an outward expression of it. And so I would sit at the piano for, hours sometimes, just kind of playing and exploring each improvisation at the piano being a different path down the river. And it allowed me to really get in touch with my emotions, to get in touch with my creativity, with my imagination. I would have ideas, and these were beautiful explorations in both creativity and consciousness. So I was like, okay, how do I translate that to an experience that others can partake in without having to play, right? I'm the one playing. So, most people don't actually perform, live publicly, even if they took lessons as a kid. So, so I said, well, I really want nature to be a part of this because I know how important nature is for my own healing and my own imagination, right? How many of us, we can all relate to walks on the beach, walks in the forest, where we're just expanded. And if we're going through a tough time, we're healed. So I said, I want it to be on the beach. And I want to gather everybody there, have my piano there, and all kind of really come together in nature and music. Now, of course, there's a lot of logistical problems when you want to do that, right? The first and foremost is getting a, huge grand piano onto the beach and not having it ruined, right?
Right.
So the other is the acoustics in nature are actually not great at all. And even if you blast it with speakers, it just doesn't sound good. Especially a nuanced instrument like a solo piano, really, where you want it to be an intimate feeling.
Yeah, well,
so
you're
that's
right, especially with instruments like the piano. Setting is so essential because of the way that acoustics typically work. It can make or break a performance, right? So
exactly.
Outside and you lose the walls and the,
Right. And it's windy and the ocean sound, it's beautiful, but it's terrible acoustics. So and then right there, this kind of aha moment happened where I was like, what if I had all the participants, the whole audience in wireless headphones? And now everyone has a deeply intimate, personal experience of the music. No matter where you are on the beach, in the park, you are essentially in the first row, right? And then I actually, instead of taking a 600-pound grand piano, I would take an electric grand piano, which wasn't, an issue with the elements and the salt air and all that. And what was even cooler is that I made it silent to the outside since there's no speakers. So people walking by actually hear nothing. They just see me playing the piano furiously and they don't hear anything unless you have the headphones on. And the moment you put those headphones on, you're transported into this soundscape, into this other world where you're listening to the soundtrack of this incredible environment that you're in, right? Whether it's the ocean or Central Park in New York or wherever we happen to be. And so people would come, they either lie down on their blankets, bring beach chairs. It's very casual, it's very communal. Sometimes they even get up and I invite them to walk up and down the beach. The headphones will work, they're wireless, they'll work hundreds of feet away from the piano. So you have people walking all over the beach, finding their own moment. If they're going through something, they want to have their own alone time, great. and then they come back to the group. If they are with a partner or with a loved one, they can go on, a walk with them in silence, listening to the music. Some people I've seen standing in the ocean up to their waist with the headphones on, right? We're always like, oh, I hope they don't realize that the headphones are not waterproof. But anyway, we've lost a couple along the way, some casualties, Heather, but but it's worth it. It's worth, anything for art, right?
Right.
So people really have this profound experience, and then the magic really happens when you're in your own world now with the music and nature, and you then look around you and you see hundreds and hundreds of other people also having their own alone moment, their own individual, intimate, personal moment, and you're all sharing that together. And that's where it clicks, that's really what's happening with the human experience that we're all in, right? Is we each think our own experience is so unique. And to a certain extent it is. The details of our lives are unique. No one's living a life like you or like me, or any of your listeners. But we're all kind of leading those unique lives together. Mm-hmm. And we'll all go through similar arcs of the human experience, right? We'll all experience joy at some point, loss at some point, and it's about the embracing of that journey and relating to each other through that arc of the human experience. And that's really what the music is. It's a soundtrack to that.
Well, I love, this concept of having an individual experience that is still part of a whole, because anybody can think back to most musical experiences. If it's a performance, right, you're in an audience, you're sitting right in very similar seats, you're going to generally have similar viewpoints, similar, you know what I mean? But it is fascinating to think of this twist and like really being able to create this unique experience, like you say, where people can still be part of the whole, but be walking on their own or in the water or not. Like that part just adds this whole level to it that just feels, it feels lovely, but also fun. Just like this.
I had somebody, absolutely. I had somebody attend this, of course, pre-COVID, my concert in Central Park about 2 years ago. And they told me that so he and his partner went exploring through the paths of Central Park, and they ended up like half a mile from where we were, and they said
still hear you.
They could still hear it perfectly, and they truly, to your point, right? They truly had their own unique experience than anybody else there, yet listening to the same music, and that's what's so cool about it. You really can make it your own. Some people like to move; they maybe want to find some abstract movements. Some people, I find that they're standing on their head, just to experience like an inversion in yoga, whatever. People are doing their own thing, especially in places like New York, right? And so it's great. I embrace that, and other people just want to lie and look at the sky. It's fantastic.
Well, and this idea that allows people to essentially have choice in the way they participate. It becomes this participatory event versus most, quote unquote, traditional concerts where you're really a receiver, right? You're really, you can participate in small ways, but it's really about like the gift of being there and receiving the music. Like yours almost this co-creation type of experience, right? Because for everyone it's going to be different.
There really is this performance art element to it where the participants are expressing themselves in their own way, like performers. And by the way, I take notice of that. I'm not oblivious to it. I do take notice of it because I see it all around me. And that actually inspires me. And because the music is always improvised, each time people attend, it's different music, different path down the river. I then work that into the music. If I see somebody kind of dancing in the way they are, or I remember one time these storm clouds came in. And I was watching them come in, and I work that into the music. Other times the wind picks up tremendously, and I work that into the music, So each one is unique in that way. And, to your point about choice, it really is about, I'm very present to creating more choice for people. Because to me, choice, the more choices we have in life, equates directly to the amount of freedom we're able to move through life with. And so I want people to feel like they have permission to feel like they have more choice in what they're feeling, in how they're moving, in what they're doing, in what they're thinking, all of it. And that really is a big shift for people when they come, and it's a real aha moment. It's very transformative. It's the greatest feedback I can get is when people come up to me afterwards and they'll tell me it's one of the 2 or 3 greatest experiences of their lives. And often I'll get people who say, I had no idea what I was coming to.
Right. How could they?
And it's exactly what I needed, And so that I get that a lot. Which is wonderful.
It is. I got goosebumps when you said, it's the top 2 or 3 experiences of my life. I mean, that's phenomenal. I have some other thoughts wandering around, but I also wanted to comment on the challenge of performing in nature. So my own personal experience with this, I actually grew up studying classical piano and was pretty hardcore about it for a long time. But my sister, once I was actually kind of out of my avid study of music, but I still had a piano, was still playing, she asked me to write a song for her and sing at her wedding. And I thought, like, okay, normally that would be a no, right? For most, like, I am not a singer. I don't sing. I enjoy singing, but it's not like, that is not my comfort zone. Let's start there. But I said, okay, because you're my sister, like, I will do this for you. And I actually love the song that I ended up writing for, but it was on a boat. She got married on a boat.
Oh, wow.
And so the piece that I had not considered is that, I bring in this portable piano and I sit down to play. And so the boat is rocking, and then literally I am facing into a setting sun. Like, right. And you
can't see anything, and your equilibrium is off.
It was the weirdest, hardest, musical experience because I had not considered all these other factors. And so here I am, I'm literally and I'm when I think back on this, I laugh at myself like, what? Why did I say yes to this? Like, I have motion sickness. Of course I was going to get sick. I'm nauseous and trying to sing and I'm burning my eyeballs out because of the sun. It was hilarious. It ended up being fine, but it was really challenging. We can take for granted as musicians, like how much of our environments are contained and safe and controllable and all these things, right? You remove those.
Absolutely.
Watch out.
Absolutely. I've had the interesting experience of also playing on boats and ships, and I can relate to what you're saying. Probably the most analogous experience was playing at Burning Man, the festival. And if you're familiar, if your listeners are familiar, there's these things called art cars that people have, right, where these crazy expressions of vehicles, with flames coming out of the top, and just wild looking vehicles. Straight out of the movies, right? And they kind of roam around the desert there. Well, I do this event each year at Burning Man, which is I place my keyboard on the top of one of these art cars, and they drive it around the desert, and we have hundreds of people at Burning Man following the car on bicycles, because that's how most people get around in Burning Man, right? So everyone's on their bicycles, and they have the headphones on, and I'm transmitting from the art car, but the art car is bouncing around all over the place, right? And it's a desert landscape with there's lots of bumps and stuff. So I have to anticipate the movement so that I don't fumble on the piano. So it becomes this beautiful challenge that I like to embrace, when I'm there. And then of course one time a sandstorm hit, and so it was a complete whiteout. And thank goodness I had my goggles, only to protect my eyes, but I could not see even the keyboard in front of me. So I just had to feel my way playing, continuing as we all, forged ahead into the sandstorm. It was about a 25-minute sandstorm. That's crazy.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So I actually studied piano at Utah State University. I followed a professor who'd left Juilliard, who became the piano head at Utah State. And while I was there, I took a photography class. And that is where I first got exposed to images from Burning Man.
Oh, yes.
My professor was an avid attendee of Burning Man. And, for anybody listening, if you haven't seen the imagery, I've
Yeah,
never been to an event, but the imagery is just astounding, is beautiful. I mean,
yeah.
so artistic and transformative. I can only imagine the experience of being there in person, but the images that I've
Yeah.
seen have been phenomenal.
Well, it's a landscape that is so creative, and what people do. 80,000 people descend on that
Right.
patch of desert and create something just wild for a couple of weeks, and then it disappears. I mean, it's
Yeah, the
really
whole
wild.
thing is an
Yeah,
act of creation. That's amazing. I can only
exactly.
imagine you riding around on the top of one of those and trying to play
Yes,
the
and
like
with literally flames coming out. The guy driving it was like shooting
this
flames out the top. It was
this
it's
doesn't
fantastic.
feel safe to me. Was this safe?
Hey, it's all relative.
Right. Were you like in bubble wrap or something just in case you fell off? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I kept a personal fire extinguisher with me. No.
Right. So one of the things that stood out about like the way that you approach your work and even in your description is this idea that or your very strong motive to help people find their purpose. Talk
Mm.
to me a little bit about that. What does that feel like or look like for you?
I think where that comes from for me is, being so present to my own kind of passions, my own purpose,
Mm,
um, and always feeling, in a way, kind of this struggle of, when do I really pursue it? It felt like it was always out of reach in a way. As I was doing the technology, as much as I loved it, I always felt that I wanted to do the music in a bigger and bigger way, but I didn't know how that was gonna show up.
mm,
So, I really can relate to people that have such dreams, um, or they want to just make an impact in the world, but they don't know how. And if the experience that they have with me and my music can get them a step closer to that, um, then that's wonderful. And a lot of that is going deeper within,
mhm,
really tapping into the greatest source of inspiration, right? I mean, we look externally for inspiration so often, right? We want to, listen to a great speaker, a talk. We watch a video. We go to nature. We get inspired. The lots of sources of inspiration, but the greatest source of inspiration that is sustainable inspiration that will last not just minutes or hours or days, but years or decades, because that's what you really need, right?
mm,
Must come from within. You gotta source it from within. It could be inspired, sparked, triggered from something external, but once you find, that's kind of like the starter log in a campfire,
mhm.
and then once you get the blaze burning within you, it could really continue to fuel your mission in life.
Yeah.
So if I can provide kind of the setting for that to take place, and it's going to be different for everybody, right? I mean, it's not about people coming to a mind travel experience and being like, oh, I want to be a musician. No, it's not that at all, right? It's about, no, it's whatever's unique to their expression. But it puts them in touch with their own inner self, their truest self, their source, their values, what's important to them. For some reason, and I get this from so many people, the music, it just kind of sets your priorities straight for some reason. The particular music that I share, and it just gets you thinking in a big way about life,
Mm,
and not the petty way we usually think about things. We can all of us, right? I mean, myself included, we can all be so petty at times, so righteous at times, so small thinking at times. We
mm,
want to be right. We want to be, in control, and we want everything to go our way. And there's a whole other way of being that is so magnificent and so filled with possibility and so abundant and so filled with joy. And that's what we're talking about here, right? Is tapping into that and moving forward, in that way. And I would say also that, once you come face to face, which I did with profoundly difficult grief, loss, which I did in the sudden and tragic death of my younger sister. This is going back now about 14 years, 15 years ago,
mm,
um, and it was just devastating. And when you are face to face with that level of grief and loss, Something, and it may not be the case for everybody, but there's an opportunity for you to be cracked open so wide through the heartbreak, because you're just so heartbroken in that moment, right? At that time when someone's so close to you, something or someone you cared about so deeply is no longer, that you're just so heartbroken, because it is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That what happens in the aftermath of that really will pave the way for the rest of your life. How you view that moment, right? If you choose to retreat for the rest of your life internally, which, by the way, can be understandable, you know. I mean, this was my younger sister, 12 years younger, but imagine a parent losing a child, right? I mean, that's the worst thing that could, possibly be. To a certain extent, it felt that way for me because I was so much older and had that kind of relationship with her. But I was not my parents, and how my parents have actually gone through it with such grace is remarkable. But certainly, if someone said, "I'm checking out," like I just can't even, like, you would understand, right? I mean, you couldn't be like, "Oh, come on, don't be weak." Like, no,
Snap out of it.
Yeah, like, you'd be like, "I get it." Like that is hard to come back from. And at the same time, that heartbreak can open up such love and access to love, because underneath that profound pain, underneath that intense grief, it's there because of the intensity of the love. You wouldn't feel that much pain if you didn't love that much.
Right.
So it's about, how do we get through back to that love underlying all of it? Yeah. It's kind of like having a beautiful glass of water, right, that one day gets all muddy and silty, right, just like that. And now you can't drink it because it's just all silty and filled with mud. But we can purify the water again. We can put it through filters, right? And for me, music was that filtering process, right? I used music day in, day out. And it didn't take, it's not going to take one pass through the filter, right? It's like, okay, you got to put it through a whole bunch of times. And little by little, the water starts to clear up, right? Little by little, it goes from, brown and murky and dark to clear and light. And that's the process that music allowed for me. And really, that was the tipping point for me. Seeing what it did for me, I was like, I think others can benefit from this no matter what they're going through. They may not be going through something that I went through. Everyone is unique, but I think it can help them. And when you really get that, it's almost like you're compelled to do it. Like it wasn't like, okay, let me see what else I can do. And I was just like, no, I got to do this. I got to share it. And that's when it went from being my own thing to saying, okay, like we said earlier, right, I'm going to bring people behind the curtain, behind the veil, and say, look, this is what works for me. This is what has allowed me to have such transformative breakthroughs in my life. And if it works for you, please take it.
Well, one, I just want to say I'm so sorry for your loss, and that's it's a really tough one. I lost my mom early in life, and then I also lost my youngest, my baby sister. Now, let's see, 10 years ago.
Yeah, so you get it.
A car accident. Yeah, just, she was 25. We were actually that day at the funeral of our stepmother's father. So we'd all been traveling together. It was a really horrible circumstance, but my mom died of glioblastoma, and so it was a 10-month process. Right. And we used to say, like, oh, we're so grateful that we at least got more time with her and that it wasn't just a sudden death. And then we experienced the sudden death, and it's a different kind of grief. It's a different process trying to resolve that grief. And I want to thank you for even opening a conversation on grief, because like you, I feel that it can be transformative. I don't think any of us get to opt out of it, right? We all of us at some point have, I think, a deep grieving experience in our lives, and it may be different. I mean, I think the grief related to losing a child is in some ways probably quite different than the grief of losing a different kind of family member. So it's not to say that they can be equated, but it is really interesting to observe what people do with their grief.
That's right.
And like you said, there are some responses that are understandable and that are forgivable, and yet when you watch somebody really use their grief to transform themselves, the way they relate to their work, it was really interesting, because actually just today I came across a woman on TikTok of all places, and she cleans headstones. She goes to cemeteries and volunteers, and she does the before and after videos of like what it looked like and then what it gets transformed to, and it's phenomenal. And the root of her path was that she went through a really long, tumultuous, extraordinarily painful battle over her children with her ex-husband, and it was so painful for her. I think she lost a lot of family members. I think, anyways, I don't know all the ins and outs, but she said that's what prompted her. The whole, where I want to go with this is your comment early on about being open to trying new things, and open to just viewing things, just seeing things that we may not normally see if we're not open, right? She had this experience one day where she either heard about or observed somebody else cleaning a headstone, and she thought, maybe I could do that. And she just tried it. She just went and got the supplies and tried it. And she has millions of followers, like millions of people who will tune in and watch these headstone cleanings, because they're really powerful. But this is what she's done with her grief now for like 3 years. And she talks about the transformation that she's been through during that time and what cleaning headstones has done for her.
That's a remarkable story. And I mean, what a hero that woman is. And I can imagine it starting as such a solitary, personal experience, right? It doesn't strike me, right? It wouldn't strike anyone as the kind of thing you would do for attention, or you would do with observation in any way. Yet somehow, I think what you just said was that somehow this process is now being live streamed to millions of people. That's wild, and I think magnificently beautiful. I mean, it's such a peek into an intimacy.
Well, and I think that's how it started for her, is she actually said she needed to create a safe place for herself, because nothing else in her life felt safe. And so she retreated to the cemetery and, would do these rituals of every day, just choosing a headstone and cleaning it. And then through that process, like, she'll get to know a little bit about the person and sometimes do research on them and like actually feel this connection in a really profound way to what she's doing. And now millions of people watch her do this, and it's really like, it's one of these weird things that you're like, why can't I stop watching this?
That's right. Because it's so authentic, right? I mean, it has such an authenticity to it. I mean, all of us, everyone you encounter, whether you talk to them or not, stranger or friend, has an internal pain, an internal struggle that they're dealing with, that we may not be privy to, probably not privy to. Yet knowing that may exist in the other person's experience can open up an empathy, right? Just knowing that each of us has that, right? Right? It doesn't have to be the death of a sibling. It could be whatever it is. I mean, we all have our own struggles. And as you said, grief will touch everyone at some point. And grief is personal. It's not about greater or lesser than grief. It's just your grief and how you move through it in the time frame you move through it. There's no short, long, medium. There's no right or wrong. It's just how you move through it. And there is the ability to bring consciousness and awareness to it, not just being at the mercy of it, right? So that's where, turning to music, turning to support of friends and family, and even professional support. These are all wonderful tools to generate more awareness and expression, right? To get the pain out of us, so we're not stuck with it alone. And transmuting that pain over time into more meaning, more connection with the other person, right? With the person that we may, that may be gone. So, and that's what this, the story you're sharing about the woman who cleans the tombstones, right? She's clearly creating some kind of meaning and which creates a deeper connection with the family members that have died of hers, and really even then a broader connection with many other people. Right? She's not just doing this for the headstones of her family members. She's doing this for others, for strangers, right?
Yeah.
And almost creating this trans spiritual connection with them. I mean, it's kind of remarkable. And that's the opportunity for all of us. Is it's incredible in the grief counseling world. If you go back decades, like 50 or 100 years ago, which is in the realm of humanity, not that long ago, the professional advice, this is kind of going to sound crazy, but the professional advice back then from professional therapists would have been, do your best to forget about the person who died. Like, do your best to just rid yourself of anything that reminds you of them and move on in life. That was the advice given. They thought that was the best course of action. Now, we know that's not the case today. And the advice today is really the opposite, right? The guidance is of course, you must first accept the reality of it, right? And not be in delusion around it. We have to have that acceptance of it. But ultimately, that final stage, after we go through that, is about creating a deeper connection to the person and having them with you every day. Again, we're not talking about in a literal sense, but
Right.
in the sense that their memory is with you and that adds something to your life. And that's the place I was able to get to with my sister through all the tears. Was that place where every time I sit at the piano now, I imagine her at the other end, dancing to the music. So she was a dancer. So I and I picture her there, right there with me, and it brings a smile to my face, and sometimes it brings a tear, and that's okay.
Right.
But it's a connection. It's not the same kind of saddened pain. No, it's more like just an expression of love. I just really love her, and I miss her, and that's cool. And she's right there with me in that sense.
Yes. Well, and even your personal example, I think, really is a good one for showing how grief does transform, how, you allow it to transmute, and it doesn't have to always look like it did at the beginning. And I think a lot of people get afraid they're going to be stuck there, there. And I think a lot of people just don't allow themselves. It was interesting because I just went to a women's retreat a couple weeks ago, which was my first foray traveling and out in the world post, the start of COVID. And so it was an interesting and really wonderful experience. And it's called The Journey to Stillness. And it was just a bunch of fabulous women that came together to do this work. And I've walked with a lot of grief in my life. I mean, and I'm not saying it's more or less than anybody else, but the loss of my mom, my sister, 7 years and 7 pregnancies to get my 2 children here. So lost 5, pregnancies along the way. That was really tumultuous and hard, and, and things beyond that, other kinds of losses where it becomes a thing that's just with you, and there was one woman there who'd really had a hard time processing her grief. And I remember she asked me once we'd been able to talk for a bit, she was like, how do you do grief well? And I was like, well, I don't know that there's any one way through, but for me, the key has been just allowing myself to feel it, to feel really bad at times with the reality of the loss, because if you don't let yourself actually deeply, deeply feel, it doesn't move. It does not.
It will stay stuck if you don't.
Yes. And
and we can distract ourselves from it, which is really the instinct that most people have is, let me not feel this pain. Let me turn the TV on. Let me, just go meet friends. Let me turn to the bottle, turn to drugs, turn to other behaviors that will allow me to not feel the pain I'm in. But then, of course, once that behavior's done, you're right back with the pain.
Yes. No, I think.
And then, unfortunately, that's where addiction, can be started, because you just constantly want to numb that pain, and especially when it's that intense.
Yeah. What is it? I mean, as a musician, what is it do you think about music that has such unique capacity for I mean, and I know that for you, even when I say music, it's a lot bigger than how most people think of it because of the way that you experience and express music. But to be this combination of like transformative and also allow mindfulness, and like how is music
Yeah.
that much? How is it that big? How is it that I don't know? Like how do you think it is such the powerful
Yeah.
tool that it is?
Yeah, I've given this quite a bit of thought because I was equally as fascinated by it as you are, rightfully so. And I think the first thing that's important to say is it doesn't matter, it works. Okay, I'll say that first.
Yeah. You don't have to believe in it. It is what
Yeah,
it is.
it just it doesn't matter. It works. Okay, now we want to know why. Okay, let's go there. Okay, so we can do that. And my best estimation is that let's talk about language for a moment. Okay, spoken language, right, that we're using right now to communicate with each other, is a linear language. And what I mean by that is we're putting one word in front of the other, creating sentences and paragraphs, and ideas are being shared. Right now, here's the thing: if we both do that at the same time, it's we can't understand each other. Right? It's just noise. Right? So we have to do it one at a time. So it's kind of asynchronous in that way. So it's both linear and only one person at a time can do it for there to be any effective and efficient communication, right? You would agree with that?
I agree.
Okay, now let's turn to music. Certainly we can replicate the same thing that spoken word offers, right? I can take notes and string them into phrases and string them into a song. And if I'm, say, a violinist, I can play a nice tune. And let's say you're a flutist and you can then play a nice tune and we can exchange tunes and there's a communication happening in a linear fashion. But music can go the next step, which is both people can play at the same time, can share at the same time, can speak, so to speak, at the same time. And now we don't call that noise like we do with spoken word, but we call that harmony. We call that polyphony. And it's not only relegated to two voices, but you can have three, you can have four, you can have five, you can have an endless number. And that is the richness of music, the multi-layered, the multi-dimensionality of music. It is not linear and only goes in one direction. It does go in a linear direction, and it also stacks, right? And it has a verticality to it and a horizontal nature to it. And in that matrix of possibility, of all the interactions of all the notes, right, you now have expressions of emotion that are taking place that you wouldn't have with any of the single voices. That's what's incredible, right? You play a C and you play an E, individually, they'll have their impact. You put them together and you actually get something, a third impact, not even, it's different than the two individually.
It's like the multiplication of, yeah.
That's right. And so, and then you have, when you start to stack it, you get this exponential expression. Now, why is that important? That's cool, but why is that relevant to the question? It's relevant to the question because we're talking here about emotions, right? That's what we're getting at. And we're trying to understand, why does music have such a profound impact on us emotionally? And I like to call music the language of emotions for this exact reason, because emotions are not linear. Look at our conversation just now about grief. We just said it, you can feel good one day, then you can, be hit by a wave of grief. It could take years. It could take, it's all over the place. And within grief, right? If we think of grief almost like an iceberg, only 10% above the surface and 90% below the surface, there's so many emotions that could be caught up in grief, that are entangled in grief, right? There could be shame, there could be guilt, there could be sadness, there could be, there's a million things in there. There could be anger, there's tons of emotions. We call it grief, but really grief is a wrapper for so many sub-emotions that are kind of drafting along this thing we call grief. So to get through it, really what's necessary is to start to untangle this knotted mess of emotion that we're feeling. And that's why it's such a leveling and flooring experience at first, because God, we don't even know what we're feeling. It's such a mix, and we're being tossed around like in a storm on a ship, right? You're just being tossed around from emotion to emotion. You're angry one minute, then you're sad the next minute, then you're depressed another minute, then it's just, then you're laughing another minute, thinking about a memory. I mean, you're all over the place. And we have to parse out and untangle these emotions, and music can do that because it can hold all the emotions with it. There's nothing I could think of that can hold the space for both joy and pain at the same exact time. I can think of things that can do it separately. I cannot think of anything that can do it at the same time. And that's the power of music. And that's why it's so healing, because it allows us to feel both joy and pain at the same time.
Oh, I love that description. And even in hearing that, like I can think of certain songs, like even played, like there was a Sarah McLachlan song I used to play on my grandmother's piano, a very specific kind of sound that came out of that piano, but a really melancholy sound, but so joyfully experienced even when playing it, you know?
You got it.
And it
That's
is
exactly
this combination where like it's so joyful to play it and you could be streaming tears at the same time.
And you're so happy doing it for some reason. It's bizarre. It feels like a counterintuitive idea, but how many of us actively turn to melancholy music? Why would we do that to ourselves? I mean, really, why? Are we gluttons for punishment? No, we're looking for healing. We're looking for resonance. We're looking for our pain to be heard and seen. And it is heard through the music. Well, and that's how I think about it. You know, it's like when people come to an event, I'm like, I want to meet you right where you are with the music. I don't want to try to be all happy up here just yet. It's too early for that. No, I want to meet you where you're at, dig into the dirt of the emotion, get dirty with you. I want to get messy. I want to get muddy. And then we're going to rise up together.
Well, it's really beautiful to think of music as a container. And you're right. It feels like it is, you know, has the capacity to be big enough to like hold all these things. And when I think about the way that we experience music, at least for me, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, like you feel it in your body as well, right? It's not just which I think is what helps it feel so transformative, is emotions need to move, and we have physical, I mean, just on another episode that I was recording just before this, we were talking about how emotions live in the body and you feel them. And sometimes you don't recognize what emotion you're having until you actually connect with the physical feeling of it, right? And music just has this beautiful way of like getting into all those places.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it is absolutely true. Emotions are the somatic expression, right, of some thought or belief that's painful to us, and that we do feel them in the body, literally feel them in the body. And if not processed, what happens? They stay stuck in the body, right? And so why would music then be potentially something that could help that? Well, what is music? It's vibrational. It is by definition, it is a frequency, it is vibrational, it is that movement. And so it is resonating in our bodies in that sense. And so it can really help move that pain through, because each of these emotions also is a certain frequency, is a certain vibration to it. I mean, we literalize this, by the way. I mean, we will literally tremble when desperately, tragically afraid, right? In tremendous pain, we will tremble. So there is a vibrational element to pain. And we can use, and by the way, there's a vibrational element to joy. We'll jump for joy, right? We'll also move, right? I mean, there's a whole spectrum of it. And music can be your companion with it to help move you through both of those. You know, when I think about like what would I want my, final moment or my deathbed to be like, right? I don't think it's a thought that is unique to me. I think we might all think that at times. Will I be sleeping? Will I be, will be some tragic end, in an accident somewhere, or what? Like, what's, what, like, what's the scene going to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think ideally, there's family there. There's people that I love. There's nature. I'm hoping I'll be staring at the ocean, maybe. And there's music there. There's music there, and there's music there to help that transition, to gracefully hold my hand, through that process.
Yeah.
And because I think it is that vibrational quality where I will be going at that time from a vibrating entity to one that will no longer be
In the same
playing,
form. Yeah.
right? And by the way, all the constituent parts of me, which is literally every molecule, atom, cell, and subatomic particle, will actually continue to vibrate long after me, and it'll be transformed into something else. It'll be transformed into soil, into a worm, into a bird, into a beetle, into a whatever. And that's how it was before me, because it originally, every particle in me vibrated and was forged in the heat of a star somewhere, literally, not figuratively, literally.
Right. We are
So
made of stars.
we all are, and that's a violent vibration. And then it exploded, and those particles shot across the universe for God knows how many millions, hundreds of millions, and billions of years, and somehow coalesced into this planet we call Earth, and then somehow conspired to become organisms and eventually human beings, and it will decompose and decay into some other organism. But there's a limited amount of matter in the universe. More doesn't get created. It just, that's the nature of the law of conservation, right? The law of conservation of energy states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It just shifts from one form to the other. And that's all we are, ultimately. And that's all that music is. Now, why is the piano especially so evocative? Why does it call forth from us such an emotional reaction, such a sensitivity? Well, I think it's because the piano, unlike many other instruments, the moment you hit a note, and you're a pianist, you can hopefully relate to this, right? You hit the note, immediately you've just played the loudest that it will play, and then it decays. You can't hit a note and then expect it to get louder. The mechanics of a piano don't work that way. Now that's different than, say, a violin, right? A violin, you can start softly and then get louder with the bow, right? By applying more pressure. But the piano can't work that way. It's a percussive instrument with strings. So you hit it, depending on how hard you hit it, that will be the loudest, and then it'll decay. You hit another note, that's the peak, and then decay. Peak, decay, peak, decay. So each expression of your fingers on the piano keys are small, infinitesimal expressions of the impermanent. And we then string them together to create the illusion of continuity and permanence, maybe in a sense. I'm maybe overusing the word, but continuity, let's say, until the piece is over. And the whole piece in and of itself is an expression in impermanence as well. And so I think we consciously or subconsciously resonate with that as we're listening, because that is the ultimate teaching. That is the ultimate spiritual teaching. It's the ultimate emotional teaching, is an intimacy with the impermanent. The moment we can embrace that, and we can embrace that when we're confronted directly with it, as you have been, as I have been, as many, many have been, as all will be.
Right.
As all of us will be. When we are confronted with it, face to face with it, and we invite that intimacy with the impermanent, the illusion of how we think of life can fall away. And we can then be present to a much deeper awareness of what it means to be alive.
I love that. Well, and that is where it's interesting because I think, at least for folks that I know who've been through deep grief, there was like this point in time where life before was a certain way and then life after was very different.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
changes everything. And I think it changes our experience of joy, of everything else. And I remember because my mom passed away when I was 23, 22, 23. And I remember thinking like life was really happy until
Mm.
this time. But even when I look back, it still somehow feels like a false happiness. Like I didn't really know what true joy and true happiness was because
Yeah.
I did not have that contrast. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. It was, in a way, you were in a dream,
Yeah.
which can be lovely, but it's not reality,
Yes.
and you're not awake. And I think we all like to be in dreams, but you're not awake in your dream.
Yeah.
And I think most people move through life in the dream world, um, unaware. Right, it's like the Matrix. It really, I mean, that movie really nailed it, and it really is like. And at first it could be painful, and it probably will be painful. By the way, we shouldn't sugarcoat it here.
No.
It will be painful, and if we have the courage to move through that pain, to feel that pain, not to skirt the pain, not to avoid the pain, not to distract from the pain, but to feel it thoroughly, to allow it to level us, to allow that pain to have us touch rock bottom. I mean, many people may not go through life feeling rock bottom because we live in a society that can comfort us enough and distract us enough that it's not necessary to go through life and hit rock bottom. You may, but you also have to allow yourself to.
Yeah.
Either through negligence of your own life, meaning,
Right.
You get lost
You get
in
the
addiction.
brick in the face.
Yeah. And you just get smashed in the face, going 100 miles an hour, figuratively, and you're set into a rude awakening that if you don't change something, you will absolutely die.
Yeah.
Or you enter into it a bit more gracefully through embracing the pain, and then you find yourself in the bottom of this abyss, and you find yourself free falling for quite a while. And the free falling is the scariest part because you don't know how long you'll be doing that for. But then at some point, we do find some firm footing. There is a toehold that we somehow can get, which allows us to push off of. See, when you're free falling, there's nothing to push off of. So what do you do but fall? You have no choice but to keep falling. But once you then get to the bottom of wherever that is, you then have some firm ground to push back up from. And that's the rise of the phoenix. That's the resurrection. That's the resurgence. That's the coming alive again. And you do so in a completely new way.
Yeah.
And you're never the same. And
That's right.
I think that's what you're speaking to.
Yeah, and your description of the experience of grief, I mean, like a free fall, and even before your description about it being an iceberg and like so much bigger, like grief is the word that we say, but it, I appreciated your, the description of it actually being so much more than that. There's all these other
That's right.
complex emotions all wrapped up into a big ball. And I remember, in facing that what was clearly the end for my mom, she was way too young. She was my age. She was the age I am now. And she had 6 kids, children who were still in middle school and high school. Wow. And, it felt so wrong. Everything about it just felt so deeply challenging and wrong. And I remember that the whole 10 months, but particularly the first few months of that, it's there. I couldn't describe it in any other way except you wake up every day and then realize like you're in this nightmare, and I think that can be how grief feels. And I would describe it to people like physically, it was so weird. It felt like my cells were breaking. Like it
Mm.
felt like on a cellular level, there was just so much pain. And I mean, I even look back to that time and like I couldn't eat. I lost my appetite. Like that entire year
Yeah.
was really a struggle to get through. And yet you're right, there like some way there's a toehold. At some point there
At some
becomes,
point, yeah.
yeah, there becomes this way out. And you are never the same. I remember looking around at law school classmates and looking at what they stressed out about, and I just had no capacity for that kind of stress. It was like, I don't know. Law school exams did not stress me. There was nothing in
Yeah.
my day-to-day life that could
Yeah.
stress me because it was just a totally different perspective.
Because you then got the big picture. That's it. You get the big picture. You realize what's really important. And
Yeah.
you realize that, yeah, sure, it is important to do well in your exams and all that, but it's a different kind of important. It has a different sense of scale and relativity to it once you are confronted, again, like we said, and you become intimate with impermanence
Yeah.
on such a upfront and close way. How old were you when you went through that?
So she was diagnosed my first year of law school. So I went straight through undergrad and actually the first month or two of law school. So I was 21 and then
Yeah.
she passed away when I was 22. So I wasn't yet
Yeah, I
23.
mean, to go through that at such a young and impressionable age, you're still forming yourself. By the way, your brain was not even fully formed, right?
Well,
I
and
mean, to
I
process it.
yes, like you, I was older by, quite a few years. My sister Haley was 9 years younger than me.
Mm,
My youngest brother, who was still at home, was 7 years younger. Like I
right.
still felt all this responsibility and
That's right.
concern for their experience, and it was just, it does. You don't come out the other side of that the same person. And even when I graduated law school, I no longer had the tolerance for things that
Yeah.
I may have considered before. So, for example, the path out of school, I saw people, that came in with one big idea about what they were going to do with their law school experience and then really take different paths very far apart from what they thought they were going to be
Yeah.
doing. And for me, I looked around and I was like, I just watched my mom die and like never get to reap the rewards of all the hard work that she put
That's
into.
right.
And I was like, I am not for 1 second going to be working a job that I don't want to do, because there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee that like, you work for the man or you put in your time and you figure it out and then you get to create the thing that you really want in life.
Yeah.
Like there are no guarantees. And so that is partly what fueled my own path. I launched my own practice right out of law school. I did things that people thought I was crazy to do, but there was no other way for me.
Yeah.
And, and it's partly why I'm so committed now to the path of entrepreneurship, because I have lived the experience of life being so short. And it's like, no, this commitment to purpose and to like do the thing that you're here to do, and let's
Yeah.
help you do it right now. I relate so strongly to that. And I love that you are doing that through music, which is just
Yeah.
like one of the most beautiful tools that we have.
And look, for both of us, it was inspired by this extreme loss, and it came from that, and these are the kinds of gifts that grief can make available if we allow them to. And of course, we wouldn't wish these situations, these circumstances on anyone, but should they happen, and something like that will most likely happen at some point, the question is, how are we going to choose to react? How are we going to choose to be in the face of that? Will we be brave enough to confront it, or will we run and hide? And that's what courage really is, right? Courage is moving forward, not without fear, but moving forward regardless in the face of fear. And it is scary being confronted with that kind of pain and that kind of unknown on an existential level.
Yeah.
Yet, should we be able to move forward, there are incredible rewards on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that my music, and just like your work, I hope that my music gives people the courage to move forward, even with all the pain and all the fear. And that's what it's done for me.
Yeah.
What was your mother's name?
Deanna. Yep.
I mean, and you just can imagine. I mean, so she was about your age, you're saying. So you can imagine like her experience, like if we all listening can put ourselves in her position for a moment, in her shoes for a moment, we can't, but we can try just a little bit, right? And we can say, what was her life experience like, knowing she was that sick, knowing the clock was ticking, having all these children, right, who were so young, so impressionable, so vulnerable, and what was going through her mind? On the one hand, probably trying to be strong and, and show resolve, and on the other hand, being in tremendous pain, knowing that she wouldn't see, her kids grow up. I mean, it's devastating. And yet, look at the result of that just tragic moment is the incredible expression you are, what you're doing in life, and I'm sure the rest of your siblings.
Yeah, there's been a lot that came out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Changed everybody's lives. You can
Of
imagine
course.
what that does to a family, and I mean, and it changes us in ways that you cannot perceive coming, and that even though they feel painful, because our family looks very different now than it did while she was
Mm-hmm.
alive. She was the glue. And yet, even what that, I'll call it a secondary loss, right? It feels a little bit like we lost dad at the same time we lost mom. For me, I'll speak for myself. But even what those secondary losses create is whole new perspectives about connection, about what is the meaning of family, about what it is that we get to create, through our friends and acquaintances and other people that come into our life. And it's beautiful, right? And it's all, you're right, that like you look at the trickle effect and
That's
what
right.
happens from one, poignant example of grief, and there's a lot that comes out of that.
That's right. The ripple effects will continue on, and that's again part of that continuing meaning and connection that is available to create.
Yeah.
And in that way, your mom continues to live through your work and the work of your family.
Oh,
It's beautiful.
absolutely.
It's beautiful.
Well, Murray, I feel like we could talk forever. I've already stretched your time quite a bit. I feel like there's a part 2 of this conversation that is the relationship of, creativity and even music and entrepreneurship, right? Because
Yeah.
you bring all this wonderful experience to your current version of yourself and your work. But for folks that are still listening, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. Where do you like for them to check out your work online? Talk to us about where you show up and where you'd like to direct people.
Well, people can go to, very simple, mindtravel.com. Doesn't get any easier. Everything is there. There's links to a whole library of recordings people can download instantly. They can just go there and be listening right away. There's also a schedule of both virtual, which we started to do during the last 15 months, and surprisingly, we found a beautiful intimacy even through Zoom concerts and Zoom experiences.
Yep.
So you can check that out as well. And we even have an online community called Mind Travel Mastery, where we dig into the kind of stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
What the real elements of what it means to live a deliberate, purposeful life, right? And music is the wrapper, so that we can allows us to open up our heart to welcome those ideas and actually integrate them into our lives. But we go deep. We talk about this stuff, from what it means to be in a flow state to what love really means underneath the hood of love, to joy, to attachment. What does attachment really mean? And how is it holding us back with our expectations of others in our lives? And really, really powerful conversations that can be transformative. So I invite people to check out mindtravel.com and see what works for them. And if it does, then you're all invited.
Awesome. Well, I love that. And for all listeners, be sure to visit Murray's website. And Murray, if you show up on social media, I'm really happy to share your links there as well.
Yeah, Instagram is probably our preferred social platform, and we do a lot on Instagram. So yeah, at
beautiful.
Murray Hidary for that. Yeah.
Yep, Murray Hidary, 2 R's in Murray, and then Hidary is Hidary for people listening. So, Murray, we'll share your link to your website and your work. And if you have not yet visited Murray's website, mindtravel.com, go there, check it out. You will see how much Murray brings to his work, what an artist he is. And Murray, I'm just so excited to have you here. I so appreciate everything that we've covered in this conversation, and I feel like there's more, but it's been really lovely to connect with you.
It's been an absolute delight. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you so much. Be sure to hop over, give us a rating and some love. Let us know that you like this conversation. It will help other people find it. And be sure to check out the show notes at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Thank you. We'll see you in the next episode.